Hey, welcome back. I hope everybody had a great 4th of July. I can't believe it. I've been out of the office now for about a week. And so just cranking, getting back into the swing of things, back from traveling, it seems like everywhere, and heading back down to Florida this weekend. So anyways, really excited to be here with you. I have a great guest and good friend of mine and colleague that I will bring on in just a second. But as you know, we are at The Edition Live. I am your host, Dana Snyder, CEO and founder of Positive Equation. At Positive Equation, we equip nonprofit leaders and marketers with the digital marketing tools and knowledge necessary to attract new donors, love on the current ones, and raise more funds. So a couple housekeeping notes. As you know, I like to keep this super interactive. So please comment below with your questions as we go through this conversation with Mallory. I know she wants to hear from you and be able to give you feedback. That is the perk of joining live. And then also on Monday, I have a free webinar masterclass coming up that's going to be teaching my donor attraction method. This is on how to use social media ads on Facebook and Instagram to reach your goals. So I've been talking to a lot of people right now who are looking to put together a monthly giving campaign. They're looking to get people signed up for their events that are coming up. They just want email subscribers. So honestly, whatever your goal is, Facebook and Instagram ads can help you accomplish that. And so I'm going to break down why it doesn't need to be intimidating, why it doesn't need to be daunting or confusing or seem expensive. So if you're interested, you can join me. Just go to positiveequation.com/masterclass, and I will put that link in the comments section. So without further ado, let me just tell you some information about the lady who's going to be joining me shortly. She's incredible. Mallory is a seasoned nonprofit consultant. She used to be an executive director who has been in your shoes. She has worked with, oh my gosh, probably hundreds of organizations now on their corporate partnerships, but she has been there. So she understands what it's like to fundraise and to spend hours and hours of time trying to do that and feeling daunting and not excited about it. And so she has this incredible program called Power Partners, where she's kind of honestly refreshed the whole system of what it means to reach out to corporate partners and what it's like to be a fundraiser. So I'm really excited to have her here. And so without further ado, hey, Mallory.
Hi. Oh, hi. I'm so happy to be with you today. So thanks so much for inviting me.
Of course. Thanks for coming back after the break. We're fresh off of a July 4th vacation. And Mallory and I met, oh my gosh, I don't even know, a while ago, because I think we were both speaking at something and we crossed paths, and we have I love her energy. And so I am so excited to have her here with us. So everybody knows I don't waste any time. I just dive right into questions. So that's what we all want, let's be honest. So let's talk about, if I am a nonprofit professional and if I am in charge of finding new corporate partnerships, and I am super tired of not hearing from anybody, what's the first thing that I should do?
The first thing you should do is take a look at your email outreach and look at how you're talking to the corporate partners that you're reaching out to, and whether or not there is more than just like their name in the email and sort of a tiny surface level mention of what it is that they do and why they're aligned with your work, because 75% of that outreach email should actually be about the work that the company is doing to really help them see the alignment. And one of the biggest mistakes I see, which is why I'm highlighting this as the first thing to do, is that folks are sending really kind of stock sounding emails out to different companies focused on the work of the nonprofit. And I understand why that's what we think we should be talking about. But actually for corporate partners, we really need to frame the alignment through their lens, through their language, and through the ways that they think about partnerships.
I love this. I think it's so smart because do you have a rule about length of email?
Okay, so here's my thing with length. People ask me this all the time. And because inside Power Partners, in the video where I talk about corporate sponsorships, I do a really quick, like blah, 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 kind of example. But then the template is longer than that. And I've had people say, which one do we use? To me, length is less important when you're talking to the person about what it is that they do and what it is that they care about. So of course you don't want to be sending a 3-page email for them to get through.
Right.
But for me, it's actually really about the components of the email. Are you highlighting something that you've seen them do that aligns with the work or the audience or the brand of your organization? Are you starting there, right? Are you making a quick connection to how that aligns with your work? A quick connection with how that aligns with your work. And then 3, asking if they'd be interested in having a short call to discuss strategic partnership opportunities. If they've done something really amazing and you spend a few more sentences talking about why that's so aligned and why you're so excited about that, then the length is not the thing to be focused on, right?
Yeah,
it's really like Yes, exactly. So it's really like, what are you saying in that email? Now, another thing though about length that I'll just say is that my recommendation in follow-up, because of course you're going to likely need follow-up, right? Even if someone's interested, even if they're going to become a power partner, because we all get way too many emails a day. So in my templates, the second email is a reply all to the first email so that more of the details are below, but the second email is actually really short. So that actually gives you some like variance in how many brain calories they have to burn to get interested in what it is that you're doing.
I love that. And I think there's certain things that you can kind of templatize, right? That you can tweak without having to redo the whole thing, but it's really giving that personalized touch.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Awesome. So you mentioned Power Partners, and I am obsessed with this one tactic that Mallory has in Power Partners. Sidebar, I have seen it, I've been in it, and I'm just like blown away. She has this process called asset mapping. Can you walk us through what that is and why it's so important? Mallory was a guest also in my mastermind group, and she talks about this. And I think it is something that is so untapped that we just don't think about. And if you wouldn't mind talking about it on kind of the corporate partnership side and the nonprofit angle.
Yeah. And actually, I wrote an article today on LinkedIn for companies from the company perspective about this. So this is actually very timely. But I'll sort of start with the nonprofit vantage point here, which is, so we often think, and I thought, when I was running an organization, that the thing that I had to sort of offer to my funders was really focused on, and primarily, if not everything, was related to the programs that I was offering, right? That's what I thought my kind of like product was, right? But the thing is that nonprofits have tons of different assets associated with their organization. An asset is something inside your organization that holds value, right, to somebody else and to your organization. So different types of assets are things like your list size of your organization, right? Or how many social media followers you have, or thought leaders on your board of directors, or some of the skills that your staff have that you might not be leveraging in different ways for your funders, right? There's tons. I mean, when I do asset mapping with organizations, I would say they have 50 to 200 assets that they identify when we really get into it, right? So the reason why it's so important to identify those assets is that those assets map against different funder priorities, right? So the list size, your email list size might not matter to a foundation, but it is really important to a corporate partner, right? What's your audience size? Okay, so they're going to sponsor this event. Well, is that going out to 200 people or is that going out to 2,000 people, right? And if you're sitting there like, oh, but my list is only 200. Okay, no problem. That's one asset. Like that might not be your organization's asset, but what's really important is to understand that you have them and you have many, many of them. No one has ever done this process and been like, oh my gosh, but we don't have assets. It doesn't happen. It's not the case. You have them. You just don't know how to think about it in that way yet, because you're thinking about it through the lens through which you view your organization. And then, so what's really important is that, one, that you understand that you have all those assets, and that you map those against the right type of funders, so that in your engagement emails, you're talking about and leveraging those assets. You're making them aware of the other things you have inside your organization that are of value to them, that they're looking for in other places, that maybe even they're paying Instagram influencers, right, to like rep their brand, and like you actually have more followers than that Instagram influencer, and maybe there is a cool affiliate campaign you could do instead, because there's alignment around the work that you're both trying to do. And I think there are two, or I'll say one other thing about assets, because I can talk about this all day, is that one of the like pieces of asset mapping that I also think is like magical is that when I watch fundraisers identify these things, something shifts inside of them. Like I watch them start to show up to fundraising meetings, funder meetings, so differently.
That's
like
huge.
they all of a sudden just see what they have to offer, what they're giving. You know, my like underlying mantra is great fundraising is not an ask, it's an offer. And so often when I've been saying that for years, right, to a lot of eye rolling. But I feel like asset mapping is actually the way that I helped other people see that that was true too, because they started to be able to see, when they really saw their assets, wow, we have a lot to offer. So yeah, I love it too. And it's been transformational in my own fundraising when I first started to do it with my clients, and now inside Power Partners. So it's fun.
I love that. And I think the second part is almost just as important, is to do a fun brainstorming activity with your team and realize all the assets that you have as an organization. And it allows you to get really creative. I know in our mastermind, we were talking with an organization who owns a facility, and that right, just opens the door for hundreds of branding opportunities. If you have a physical structure where people are having to walk through something and touch something and engage with something, like they're already, the best example, I just flew Delta, and they now have a huge partnership with Lysol, right? Natural. So it's in all of the planes, and they give you the little wipes when you go on, and it's in the boarding. So like, those are areas in your boarding path when you scan your ticket. I don't even know what you call that, where you're scanning your ticket. Whatever. It's now a boarding path.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's called something.
That sounds great. That sounds great.
Whatever, where hundreds of people stand. So they have recognized, okay, these are all areas of impact where somebody is naturally going to be in the bathrooms, outside of the bathrooms, right? Where can we have these touch points with people? So whether you have a physical structure or not, there are natural things that people do when they come in contact with your organization, and where can there be areas for partnerships? So I love that. I'm a very visual learner. Are there some great partnership examples that either you've seen happen in the space or that you've helped to create?
So one caveat I'll make about this is that I think corporate sponsorships are, sometimes there's multi-layers of what makes a good corporate sponsorship, right? So I can say from an external perspective, okay, this looks like a good corporate sponsorship, but I don't know what's happening behind the scenes. So I want to give that as a caveat, right? Because like one that comes to mind, and it's so funny because I was talking about this recently, and then a week later, they launched a huge partnership campaign. So I was talking about Disney and Make-A-Wish, right? Like Make-A-Wish Foundation and Disney have been long-standing cross-sector partners. And I was saying to someone literally a few months ago, right before this campaign launch, I was like, I don't know why Disney would ever put out a commercial that didn't involve Make-A-Wish in some way, right? Like the impact of that commercial is probably going to have a much higher ROI. And so they'll actually be able to decrease their commercial spend and give the difference to Make-A-Wish, right? So like they can make a bigger impact with the funding for that commercial because people are going to be so moved by what's happening inside that partnership commercial, right? And I'm sure there are a lot of reasons why you need to diversify your commercials and whatever, but just like as kind of a baseline component, right? And then the next week, literally after I said this on something, the next week they launched a whole co-branded clothing like line, like Make-A-Wish and
Wow.
Disney hats and shirts and all these things. And so one of the things I just want to say is that, and I don't want to talk about my clients' partnerships just because it feels like a little bit of a I just don't want to put them on the spot like that. But the thing that I'll say is that one of the things that's super important to build these types of partnerships is that you as the nonprofit leader have to get comfortable talking about the business's bottom line, the business's goal, and how your organization can help support achieving these mutual goals. And so you need to get clear around your organization's sort of gift acceptance policy and who the right partners are for you. And it's probably, it might not be everyone, particularly depending on the area in which you serve. And so you need to be clear about that. And then you really need to be, because just like, I love that you gave that example of Delta and Lysol, businesses are used to building strategic partnerships all the time. What they are not used to doing is having nonprofits speak their language. They are used to nonprofits just going to them, be like, you should give us money because we're a nonprofit. They are not used to nonprofits being like, hey, we want to be a strategic partner for you. Yep. We see this mutual goal that we have, and we believe we can achieve it together. So you really have to go into that, have that sort of mindset to go into that.
I did a presentation, this was like pre-COVID, on so many creative, clever corporate partnerships with one another. I mean, this a lot of times. I had a brief stint in the entertainment industry, and there's always product placements, or there's always relationships in terms of why somebody's mentioned in a script. Like that's not for free. Most of the time, they're paying for that. That car with that logo that's getting that shot is not just because they like that car. Right. So you're right. I love the fact of you have to get comfortable with talking about it because the businesses are having those conversations all the time. It's nothing new.
Yeah. The only new thing is to consider nonprofits being able to have that conversation with them too.
Totally. And I think something that I've heard you mention before too is when people are trying to raise funds for overhead, is that you don't even have to say overhead because it's a looping your mission.
Yeah. And it's not related to the assets that they care about either, right? Like if you're talking to them from an asset-based perspective, they care about the relationship to those assets. They are not concerned. I mean, I very rarely had restricted funding come in from a corporate partner. And really, usually if there's any restriction, it's just like, this can't be used to do like this very specific thing. Like I've worked in the healthcare space a lot, right? And it's like, this money can't go to doctors or something because it violates some sort of code. But it's never like, how much is your boss getting paid? No one's asking that.
Right. Yeah. Right. They just want to make sure the impact is happening.
100%.
Totally. So let's talk a little bit about our quote unquote new normal. I feel like a plethora of out of office messages every time I send an email. And so everyone is out and about. Have you seen, as people have been going through Power Partners, any feedback or shift in corporate partnerships due to COVID and as we are kind of going back to normal?
That's such a good question. And, I think there are a few things that I've seen. One is that I think like virtual events are here to stay. And I think companies are recognizing that in a big way. A lot of them have seen what was possible without their gigantic travel budgets. And so I think their eyes are more open, and they also see that there's a lot of assets in virtual events, right? Different ways, push notifications or banner images or background screens, right? There's so many things that can be leveraged, like that's way better than that like poster you had when people walked into your gala room.
That you're never going to use again.
Yeah, that you're never going to use again, that you wasted, the research, whatever, all the things. So I think companies are really seeing the value, especially virtual events that have an evergreen component, like a learning component. I think that like companies are really seeing a huge value there. I think the other thing is that that it still feels a little bit uncertain is like budget cycles. So, typically I really suggest people start having conversations about next year. So in this case, 2022, starting now in July, because this is when a lot of companies are starting their budgets for next year, and then they're finalizing them September and October. I am seeing more companies still having those conversations now, but saying, they're not exactly sure when the budget will get finalized. I think there still does have a little bit of a looming sense of sort of ambiguity around like, is there a second strain coming? What's happening exactly in the global economy and things like that. So, just to preface that with like, don't not outreach now, like start those conversations now. That's super important. But this is why it's so critical that we talk with our partners transparently about money. Like the amount of things I hear from people like, oh yeah, we had this whole meeting, but like we didn't say anything about money. And I'm like, what? What do you mean? And so I think it's just so important that we're asking questions like, hey, like tell me about, your goals for next year and how you're thinking about applying. How's your business doing? What has been keeping you up at night over the last year? It's my favorite question. What has been keeping you up at night over the last year? And is there anything our organization can do to support it? How are you thinking about your line items in your budget and how those relate to your goals for next year, right? Those are the questions we should be asking. How are you thinking about resource allocation related to education of blank? We need to be having those conversations. That's what's going to allow us to have a lot more transparency in our follow-up too, and be able to ask questions about, okay, talk to me about timeline, right? Because I'm a nonprofit leader over here. I'm trying to solidify my budget. I totally get that you're dealing with more ambiguity than usual, but like what can be expected, or how do you want to work that out? Does it make sense to solidify something now and maybe add on the other piece later that feels more uncertain? But you need to be able to talk about those things.
I love that. Nope, very true. That's an interesting point. And I think having those continuous conversations, don't just reach out when you need the funds.
Yeah.
Reach out and have that consistent relationship. I feel like this is something I learned forever ago, but it's whenever I'm in a city that I might know someone, I reach out regardless if I have anything relevant happening, but I was like, let's grab coffee. Want to grab lunch? And it's just a check-in to check in. There's not anything I need to ask. Maybe they need something from me and they don't even know it in a conversation we're having, but it's just always trying to maintain those relationships, I think, are super important, especially now that we're getting out a little bit.
I've never said this anywhere before, so this will be a first.
Everyone write it down.
Yeah, and actually, I'm going to put this inside Power Partners. I don't know why. I'm so glad you're triggering this in me. Like with corporate sponsors, it's so easy to set up monthly or quarterly partnership calls. That's also a very normal thing that they do. And that also creates some time on the calendar where you're just checking in about how are things going? Like what's been hard for you guys over the last month? What have you seen in this space, right? Like, oh, here's what's been going on with us. Like this thing has been a little hard. We've been so excited about this. And so it just does create that cadence, and they're doing that regularly with other partners. And right, of theirs as well. Yeah, and internally, and it really, of course you're not going to go to them. I mean, I don't, in general, the way I encourage people to build corporate partnerships is around annual partnerships, even not like some sponsorship for some random gala. It's like, how do we align on our goals for the year, and what can we do together to achieve those goals?
Yeah, that's awesome. Or multi-year.
Totally. Yes, I do find in general that companies, and I think this is probably another thing that COVID is going to exacerbate, is that companies do have a harder time doing more multi-year, especially if it's coming, not if it's coming from its foundation, but if it's coming from its marketing, branding, PR arm of the business. Those have a harder kind of multi-year cycle. They can sometimes give a vague indication, but oftentimes they're testing the partnership with you too,
True.
especially with the first-time partnership. And that's great. And that's important for both folks to figure out that like this really works.
Yeah. And get a good feeling for each other. And I think that's why building that relationship is so crucial. I think if the organization likes you, just likes you as a person, they'll probably be more likely to want to continue the relationship if there's somebody that is kind and they enjoy working with. To that point, is there like one thing that always holds people up from success in building new partnerships? Like they're super excited and they're like,
Do you mean on the corporate side?
For nonprofits.
So I think what holds nonprofit folks up is their fear of having conversations that are outside of their comfort zone. They're afraid of asking questions about the business's goals because they're worried they're not going to be able to speak to them. And they are honestly just devaluing their expertise, and that it's okay to say, oh my gosh, I don't know how we would do that, but I'm super interested in trying to solve that with you. Have you worked with other organizations in that capacity before? What does that look like? Just letting themselves show up to these meetings authentically curious and with the goal of building strong partnership as sort of the key component, and just being human. I think the biggest thing that holds us back is that we think we have to go into these meetings as these like perfect little fundraising robots. And I was just saying to someone, I was like, fundraising is a human act. And the moment we remove our humanness from it and we silo our expertise and we try to operationalize the way we behave and we perform in these fundraising meetings, we've lost the whole thing.
Totally. Even with, oh my gosh, doing this with our lives, like we are imperfect people. And so things happen all the time. I've had audio stop working. I've a camera shut down. I've produced an event and my computer is almost like froze. Just like, this is life.
It is life.
I'm showing up as I am. And there's been plenty of times when I worked in the for-profit space where I'm pretty sure I made a fool out of myself. But I was like, oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And then I know. And then the next time I know.
Yeah, I know. I really think we stunt our growth so much inside the sector because of our fear of imperfection, which what I have found is, and what my clients and people inside Power Partners find, is that the exact opposite is true. Related to corporate partnerships, I really push my people to go early to new corporate partners without your perfectly branded sponsorship tiers. No, I want you to ask them, what do they want to see on there? What do they think? Here's a rough Google document. What do you think? What do you like? What do you wish was on there? Which of these assets do you feel like has the most value to your company? Like, I want to make sure this is beneficial for you. Tell me. And it's like, we just have it so twisted that around this, just because, and it makes sense because our fear of rejection plays such a big role in all of this.
That's awesome. Mallory, I could talk to you forever.
I know. I'm like, oh, whoops.
And hearing all of your advice. But there is something really exciting where Mallory is going to be having a lot of conversations coming up. And that is for your new podcast. This is so thrilling because it's really unique in the space. And honestly, I don't think there's a lot of great podcasts in the nonprofit space anyways, that are refreshing and innovative and talking about something a bit different. Can you tell us a bit about yours?
Yes. So July 20th is the launch date. The name of the podcast is What the Fundraising. And really the premise of it is that it's about bringing in experts from outside the nonprofit sector to talk about the skills and tools that we need, but we really haven't been historically exposed to. And what totally transformed how I showed up as a fundraiser was when I started to learn things outside of the sector that really applied to fundraising, like executive coaching principles and behavior design and habit chain, building and design thinking and all these different things. And I think we get so siloed in the nonprofit sector around nonprofit best practices, and it's like the thing I keep saying is like, holy moly, you guys, we are not doing a very good job at a lot of these things. So why on earth are we recycling these best practices? Because there are people outside of the nonprofit sector that actually have figured this out. What can we learn from them? And sure, it might be hard. Like one of the episodes is with someone who talks about YouTube, like how to get clients off of YouTube, right? He helps social entrepreneurs, right? But we talk about how can nonprofits be using YouTube to fundraise better, to be creating problem-aware donors. And oh my gosh, I was like, and I've never in 15 years in this sector heard anyone talk about it. And it's going to be huge if people can use, if people use and implement these strategies. So I'm psyched. July 20th. Make sure you're following what the fundraising _ on Instagram, or you go to that link and sign up to get all the early release. It's going to be super fun. Yeah, there are tons of episodes where I'm like laughing hysterically. And then there are others. There's one where I like literally cried 3 times.
Right? Oh, not that one. Is this right?
Yes. Yeah, I literally cried like 3 times because we were talking about like, how do you like ground down into your why and deal with rejection when you're in like really heart-centered work. And so, yeah, they get real. They get real. And
but I think that's so smart because I say this all the time. This is like my phrase of the only difference between the nonprofit space and the for-profit sector is your tax code.
100%.
Businesses are going after consumers. Your donors are consumers. The principles are still the same thing. When you go to make a purchase on the website, it needs to be a seamless transaction so that it happens, like Amazon or any e-commerce platform for that matter. When you go onto your nonprofit website, it should be really easy to make a donation, just like a purchase, because that's what we're doing.
Yes.
We are all, like you're talking about YouTube, we are all subscribers of a Netflix, a Hulu, a Disney, a HBO, or whatever your fancy is. So monthly subscription, monthly donor, right? All of this language is very similar.
Totally.
All of the tactics of how to get a subscriber and how to get a monthly donor are very similar.
Yep.
It's just, yes, I love the fact talking to people outside the space that do this so well to get their thoughts and feedback is incredible. So I'm going to be there. I'm tuning in. Check me off. I'll be in your reviews. I'll be there. And then if people want to learn more about Power Partners, I have a link for everybody. Can you explain what it is they'll go to?
Yes. So you will go and you'll watch a webinar. You'll go to MalloryErickson.com/free. You will watch my like masterclass webinar, which is all about how you can get in front of the right funders without hounding people. It is a value-packed webinar. I bust a bunch of myths in there about how long it should take to get a 5, 6, 7-figure gift, how you don't actually have to keep showing up like a used car salesman, and how you can, what does it look like to really be like authentically fundraising from a place of power, full connection. And I talk a lot about cold outreach too, because that's the amazing thing about asset mapping is that cold outreach is really effective. And I talk about why a lot of your warm outreach hasn't actually been working. So it's amazing. And then at the end, the last like 10, 15 minutes, I talk about Power Partners, the course. So I actually go through the blueprint of it in the webinar that you can take and use and implement right away. But then for folks who want to work with me on it or be a part of a community of folks who are moving through with all the templates and lessons and all that, there is a course, and we have the code positive for anyone who finds out about it here to get 10% off of that.
Awesome. I love it. It's good stuff. I think this is so important for the nonprofit space. And one thing I'll just kind of leave, because we're both in this industry, right? As female entrepreneurs, is the online learning space. So when it comes to, and I think we all have shiny toy syndrome. So, and I do this too. But when it comes down to online professional development courses or webinars for nonprofits, we have both signed up for them and we both are creators of them. In your opinion, why are they important to take? And what do you look for when you're signing up for one yourself?
God, that is a good question. That is a really, really good question. I mean, look, I think the reality is that professional development is important for so many reasons, right? We constantly want to and need to have a growth mindset. And the world is changing, right? And as nonprofit leaders, you don't have time to follow all of the changing trends and what's working and what's not working, right? This is how I feel as an entrepreneur. Like, I don't have time to learn all these things. So I hire the people who are in charge of learning all of those things. And then they teach me the best practices and they show me how to implement it, right? And because I really value my time. So that is one of the biggest differences I see in myself, I'll just say, from when I was an executive director to right now. I value my time so much more now than I was taught to value it inside the nonprofit sector. And so I look for professional development experiences that are going to save me time ultimately. Not that it doesn't mean the course itself won't take some time, but that the process, the templates are designed to actually save me time. Then the other thing I would say is that I really vibe. I don't know why I use that word. It's not a word I usually use, but like that I really connect with the teacher. So I have my master's in education and I'm an executive coach. And so, but I really understand that how much you like, honestly, the teacher really impacts how much of the content you absorb. And so one of the reasons why Power Partners sells off of the webinar is because I want to make sure people feel like I'm the right coach for them, that I'm the right consultant for them, that I'm the right person to listen to. Because even though the tips and tools and everything inside Power Partners are really unique and you can't find them anywhere else, if you're watching the webinar, and I get this feedback, oh, you talk too fast or you talk too loud. Well, if you feel that way and it makes you not like me, then you're really not going to like my course because it's all like, it's me, And so I want people to be able to make that decision, have that conscious choice. So I think, look at, is this thing going to save you the time that you need? And look at opportunity costs. So often in the nonprofit sector, we're like, that can cost this much money. It's like, what's it costing you to not do this thing? I have spent so much money on courses for my professional development as an entrepreneur. And every dollar that has gone out saves me hundreds of thousands of dollars probably over the time, right? I added up for someone all the different trainings and tools that went into creating Power Partners. And it was like almost $200,000 over 15 years of investments I've made in my brain to produce a course for you, right? So that you don't have to spend all of that money, but you get the expertise from all those things coming together. And that's what all these, that's what you're doing for your clients too, is like, they can never go through everything you went through to be able to create what you're building for them, right? And right. And they don't want to, and you don't want them to. And same with me, right? I'm like, oh man, I don't want you to have to learn that lesson. I'd rather just tell you how to avoid that thing, And so, but that, so I think like looking at opportunity cost, recognizing that, making sure you're looking at something that's really designed to save you time ultimately, right? Ultimately, once you learn the system and practice. And then 3, that you feel really connected to the teacher. Those are like kind of the 3 things I'm always thinking about.
I love that. So good. And agree on all fronts. Please don't go through what we've all been through. Let us save you the agony and the time and the money and all the things. Mallory, this has been amazing. I always love chatting with you. There's always so many good nuggets. Every time I was like looking down, I was writing time notes of like what to cut for like a recap. And I'm like, they're like scattered all over Yes.
I know. I'm sorry. I know we went over. I did not know how on earth we'd fit a chat, you and me, into 30 minutes, but I'm so grateful to have had it. So thank you.
I know. You rock. Thank you for joining us, and I'll catch up with you soon.
Okay. Talk to you soon. All right.
Bye.
Bye.
How amazing is Mallory? And talking about corporate partnerships, please go follow her on Instagram and on LinkedIn. Make sure in the comments, I did put both resources. So whether you're joining on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, you should be able to see the links to her podcast, which is coming up soon, and her webinar. It is evergreen, so you can join whenever and go on and to be able to watch her talk about a little bit more into Power Partners details. And again, I hope that you will join me on Monday for the donor attraction method. Mine's on ads. And let me tell you, if there's something that can save you time, Holy Toledo. I always like to say your ads are working for you so that you can have your out of office on and people are still learning about your cause and they're still donating and they're still becoming monthly donors and you are checked out on a beach, on a mountainside, or whatever your preference is for vacation. But once you get it up and running, the course cost is about like 5 donations that come in online. And that's just if it was a one-time donation. So you make up your money real fast. So love her point that she brought up there. And again, thank you all for joining me, and I will see you next week.